The topic of apexes in Evrima has been on the rise for the past few weeks ever since the announcement that both Trike and Rex are actively being worked on and planned to be released between update 7 and 8. That is pretty soon. Well, soon for Evriman standards that is, and surprisingly that information was received by the community with a lot of skepticism and concern, not only due to the game's current state, although update 6 was a significant step forward, but also because of the additional statements made by the developers on the matter, mentioning that, and I quote, "Their capabilities will far exceed anything you have experienced in Legacy, and do not expect them to appear on official servers, but rather community servers instead when they are complete and we are ready to launch them." Statements that were reconfirmed after the devblog. But why release them so early? Why making them more powerful? And why not release them on official servers? These are the main questions most of us have been debating from the day this information came to light, and the potential answers might determine the success or failure of their implementation as well as their impact on the game as a whole. I discussed about this topic on the channel many times at this point, and in case you are curious, feel free to check them first. However, today that won't be the topic I will be addressing, at least not entirely. This week I will showcase a different way to design this problematic tier of characters in a way that retains its initial philosophy without possessing the awful side effects that have been haunting the Isle for so many years. Apexes. A category of characters in the dinosaur survival genre reserved only to the biggest and deadliest species of the entire Mesozoic. We all love them. They are the most popular, the most frequently chosen, you see them everywhere. If you play a game with dinosaurs in it, chances are that you will see at least one or two of these big boys. Rex, Trike, Giga, Spino, and pretty much every single sauropod known to man, these animals are above and beyond the vast majority of the rosters of these games. But, just for context, what exactly is an apex? In real life, this terminology is used on species that establish themselves as the top of the food chain in that particular ecosystem. They are often the most successful species in that environment and directly influence the ecosystem itself in some way. In games like The Isle or Path, however, things are obviously a lot simpler. In these titles, the apex tier is the top category of dinosaurs a player has access to. They are the slowest to grow and the hardest to maintain, but in return they have the potential to become the most powerful entities on the server. They are usually categorized as slow, tanky, and with the highest damage values in the game. They are also often extreme versions of mid-tier animals, like Giga being more or less the apex version of an Aloe in Legacy, and Rex being the apex version of the Splito on Path. Of course that things are not as one-to-one as I'm explaining here, but you get the idea. This structure on its own is completely fine. Apexes are to mid-tiers the same way mid-tiers are to small tiers. It is simply an extra layer to the player's ecosystem's pyramid, except for a somewhat small detail. In a way, they function very similarly to small tiers if you think about it. They are both defined by very specific attributes, and all members of both tiers have a very limited divergence in comparison to mid-tiers, something that I explained in more detail here. Both are equally limited, they are just specialized in different stats and playstyles. Small tiers focus on mobility and stealth, having low HP and being able to reach high velocities or having evasive capabilities, while apexes focus on toughness and power, having very high HP and dealing a lot of damage. The latter, however, needs to be managed carefully. Their stats mean that they are a lot more dangerous to the whole roster in comparison to small dinos, which in turn means that they can very easily affect the player ecosystem in more impactful ways. And that is what the Isle was always absolutely terrible at. At this point, everyone that played Legacy knows very well how utterly broken apexes are. The stat discrepancy is absolutely massive, so large in fact that 3 or 4 hits from one can easily kill something as big as an Allosaurus, while also having several times their weight and health. And to make things worse, they are not that slow either. A decent portion of the Apex roster is deceivingly quick, able to catch most mid-tiers with their ambush speed. So not only their stats are way too high, the disadvantages they are supposed to have are not really there or not effective. And listen, I get it. The Isle is highly focused on immersion, so realism is an aspect that must be taken into consideration for it to have a significant effect. But this is completely unacceptable. Realism is not and will never be a justification for bad design or an unbalanced game. Realism needs to be taken into account, yes, but it should never be put over the game's enjoyment. The most important thing is for people to enjoy playing the game, and having this unbalanced mess tells us that you will only have fun playing as an Apex. Besides, this isn't realistic anyway. This is clearly a power fantasy being forced into the game. You know how I know that? Because the developers that are doing the entire game from scratch, remaking every single system and asset, are willingly making this exact same mistake again, and on top of that, they are doubling down on it and making it worse in Evrima. But I have been asked many times, Zeg, how would you do Apexes? How would you change them? Well, for one, I appreciate that you guys think my opinion matters for anything. And since I heard this question so many times, I decided to take on that challenge and conceptualize some changes for the Isle's Apex tier, fixing all their main issues while trying to keep their identity in-game. Just for context, this won't be about every single species individually, otherwise the video would be over an hour long, so I will talk about it in a more generalized sense so it can be applied on every single one of them. Let's begin with the core experience Apexes are intended to deliver in the Isle. It is evident that players take pride at the fact that they grew an Apex. You yourself probably felt a certain sense of accomplishment whenever you got that one Rex to adulthood. Players take the process of growing one of these dinos and keeping them alive as an achievement, something that they want to show off, something that they are proud of. That feeling must be kept. This specific tier should deliver the hardest experience the game has to offer. They should be the hardest and most demanding animals of the roster, because succeeding and meeting those demands rewards the player with a level of power they cannot find anywhere else. Seeing an adult Apex should immediately tell everyone that that player is highly skilled, that they acquired enough practice and knowledge to surpass all the obstacles and challenges growing an Apex comes with. More so for Elders once that system arrives into Evrima. Elder Apexes should represent the player mastering the game, a status, a symbol of skill. And that is exactly what's lacking currently. The difficulty just isn't there. 6 hours to grow anything is indeed a long time, but time alone doesn't make it challenging, because time on its own doesn't present the player with any sort of difficulty. Diets, however, that can come in handy. In the new branch, that mechanic can deeply affect the dinosaurs' performance depending on how well or poorly they perform at every given moment, during and after growth. This system is perfect to adjust the game's difficulty, especially for the big boys. Diets could negatively affect them a lot more severely in comparison to smaller species, not only stat-wise, but also in ways exclusive for them. For example, bad diets could make them stop recovering stamina while standing, gain hunger or thirst a lot faster, being unable to use certain abilities or features. Imagine that in case a Sub-Rex doesn't have any protein on its diet, its muscles would be so weak that it wouldn't be able to fracture bones, or Gigas being unable to run if they lack carbs, or Spinos unable to dive underwater if they lack lipids. By the way, these are just ideas, don't take this literally, it's more of a concept than anything. These downsides would heavily punish a player for having a bad diet. And that is exactly what we want. And the best part is that this dynamic would 100% depend on the player's skill. Good players would determine priorities better, would avoid bad diets more efficiently, and strategize where to go for their optimal diet more optimally. People already do this on a daily basis, but with Apexes they would really need to do all of this precisely and effectively, and that level of demand would filter out most of the population during the substages most likely, with only the best players reaching adulthood and even elder. Altering diets to target Apexes in a special and harsher way is, in my opinion at least, the best method Evrima has available to increase their difficulty while still giving them the opportunity and tools to circumvent, fix and avoid these consequences. Okay, here's a summary of the changes I would personally make. Slightly decrease the power discrepancy between Apexes and mid-tiers, increase their food, water and nutrient demands, increase the percentages of the negative effects from diets while keeping the positive effects unchanged, and add unique negative modifiers depending on the diet and how bad it is. I understand that some people might think this is over the top in terms of difficulty, but please keep in mind that this is solely my perspective on how this dino tier should be balanced. There is nothing wrong in you disagreeing with it, this is simply my take on how large dinosaurs could be balanced without taking power away from players. In this concept, you could potentially be as much of a menace as you were in Legacy, but here you would need to have the skill, knowledge and practice to reach that power. You would need to earn it, not just wait for it. But what do you guys think? How would you change Apexes? Do you agree with this take? Share your thoughts and opinions down below. A huge thank you to my Patreon supporters for supporting the channel and the content I create. If you want to join the ranks, you can do so for only $1 a month, the link will be in the description. Don't forget to leave your thoughts and opinions down below, join our Discord server for memes and player net stuff, and I hope to see you all next week.